Right then, hello everyone. My name's Stephen Grinnell from Interex Pain Clinic, and this is a general question and answer on plantar fasciitis. What do I know about plantar fasciitis? Quite a lot. I've been working with patients over the last 12 years. I've got a pain and rehabilitation clinic in the middle of Stratford, and I've treated about 2,500 people. So I've got a lot of data, a lot of experience. A lot of success. We don't win everything, but we win a lot more than we lose. Um, Within that, why plantar fasciitis? Why do you have it? How does it work? Well, the fascia, the base part of your foot, is a supportive connective tissue um, that helps support the foot, but allows it to be very agile. The foot is very strong, and it's a second-class lever. We'll talk more about that in a bit, but it's very much the case that it has a lot of pressure go through it, and because of the footwear that we wear, we have a lot of support as well, which means that it's something that gets damaged. I see, as I said, probably 9 to 12 people a week with plantar fasciitis. I do help with other areas and stuff as well, but I've got an ongoing running through of around that sort of number of people. And you tend to find that it's usually around 10% of the adult population in the UK have plantar fasciitis at some point during their adult life. And it usually links to a sudden movement or exercise. So I see quite a lot of runners because of the nature of their running style and them increasing their mobility, couch to 5K, those types of things. Now, one of the things I wanted to do slightly differently for this sort of live was to look at different areas that have come from you rather than me. I've sort of done different lives where I've focused on different aspects of plantar fasciitis, different details, different treatments, different things, positive or negative, things like insoles and foot socks and rockers and all sorts of stuff. So over the last week, I've put out a load of questions asking in different forums what people wanted to know about plantar fasciitis. Interestingly, the overwhelming three main hot topics were standing and moving first thing in the morning, and also standing from a chair. Walking different distances. So sometimes people found they could walk short distances or maneuver themselves around the house relatively easily. Stairs are a bit of a challenge for some people, and then walking longer distances. And then I've had quite a lot of questions over footwear, bits on insoles, but mainly footwear and footwear for different contexts. So again, those are the three sort of areas I'm going to start with. I've also got a couple of other questions which were, I felt, quite prominent because they were popping up in different areas and different forums. So we're going to look at a couple of alternative areas as well, which it will make it a little bit different to what I've done before. So the key thing, and I'm going to focus on this first, is when you stand in the morning or you stand from a chair, the loading on your foot is roughly 7 times your body weight. Now, that's the loading. It doesn't mean you suddenly get 7 times heavier, but mechanically, the force that's put for your foot is roughly 7 times your body weight. So in doing that, you can see straight away that obviously that is going to cause an acute pain response. So you're going to have more of a problem with that as a feature. Now, if you have a quick look at the foot, I brought my foot with me. I remembered it for a change. So we've got a foot here. So when you stand up, 90% of all the weight from your body goes through to your heel, which is where most people have the pain. So they have it in this sort of area. It can be from one side, middle, or to the inner part, and it can spread up the foot in this sort of way. But this tends to be the hot spot, the main sort of area, and I'll cover that in a second for why that is the case. So 90% of your body weight. So if you think whatever you weigh, 90% times that by 7. So you can imagine that's quite a big force, even if you're relatively light. You weigh 10 stone, you look and that's 70 stone. So that's a lot of force going through your foot. And obviously then when you stand up and you push and everything else, mechanically, you're also then putting point pressure on that connective tissue. Bear in mind that it connects at the heel here, and then also progresses and connects all the way along your feet and links into the ball of your foot and to your toes. So I treat people where they have problems in this area as well as this area, and obviously these supporting elements as you go along. Now, when you stand up, I've put a little video out. I've done it on email and I'll put it in the various different pages and groups and all the other features. But it's looking very much at putting the load not on your heel and to put the load onto your toes. Now, interesting, I've had a few questions about that because people have asked, well, I've got plantar fasciitis in both feet. Or it tends to be worse if I've got my slippers on or on my bare feet. It's not so bad if I'm in trainers or if I've got my Skechers on or my insoles are in. So there's variety and variance with what actually you're doing and how things work. The key thing about putting your toe down is that we've talked all about this force. It's 7 times your body weight. 90% of it goes through here. So if you've got pain here, it's sort of intuitive to put your foot in this position first. Now, obviously, you're not going to walk around on your toe and then have a flat foot on your other foot. So the key thing is to stand up so you put all the load or offset some of the load onto your supporting foot, your other foot. So the right foot, if in this case, if it's your right foot, that goes slightly forward, you pop your toe down, you put your weight on this sort of area, you bring your left foot back, and then when you stand up, you put more of your body weight through, you're supporting your good foot, for want of a better term, and put the least amount through that toe. Now, the key thing is that once you've done that, it's to lower this foot down, but not put your full force on it straight away. Just lower it down so that it's got this 90 degrees and gradually increase the body weight on there. Then as soon as you've done that, the next thing that's really important to do is to step forwards with that foot, not put that foot down, then push off this foot to step forward with your other foot. And what that does is as you stand, it gives yourself a chance to reset all the muscles, lengthen everything, but take the initial force off that 7 times body weight. So all you're doing is putting roughly half your body weight on, probably a bit less because you're standing on one foot and then lowering the other one down. So you can see straight away that rather than 7 times your body weight force going through, you've reduced it to roughly half your body weight, which obviously is 14 times less. So that's quite significant. Hence, the tactic works really well. Now, the problem that people have is it's that little thing called habits and what we've got used to. So within that, it's quite challenging to say, okay, we've got this habit, we get up and we stand this way. So the key thing is to think about that process every time you're sitting down to go to stand up. Now, it's more challenging if you're in a sofa or lower chair to get yourself in a position where you can have your feet in this offset position. One's got your toe down, that type of thing. But it's to try and do it as often as possible, particularly if you're sitting down at a dining chair, kitchen chair, or an office chair if you're at work, or you're working from home, as a lot of people are nowadays. So those things are really, really key. The reason it's so painful in the morning is that when you go to sleep, as you lie down, if we use the fact that you're lying on your back first, you very rarely sleep with your foot in that position. It tends to be more pointed, so it's flexed down, which means as the fascia starts to heal and repair itself, it's repairing itself in that position, not that position, which is how things like night socks and other bits you may have seen on the internet work. So the idea is it's trying to repair itself in the right position. But from a loading point of view, it's really important to take as much pressure off on that initial step as possible. Now, the reason that's important is that you'll have noticed on the bottom of this foot, there's loads of different muscles. And the key thing to remember is that you've got this top layer that you can see, these 3 big muscles here, and then underneath it, you've got another 3 muscles before you get down to the fascia. So you've got a really big layer of muscle on the bottom of your feet, but it's all little position muscles. And they allow the foot to twist one direction, the other direction, come up onto your toes, twist a little bit. And so they allow for lots of fine movement with balance, but also to enable you to move in lots of different directions at some point very, very quickly. Now, remember that your foot was designed not to wear footwear. So it was designed to walk on soft ground, sand, soil, that type of thing, not on concrete, not on hardwood floors or anything else. And obviously then within that, the protective element of a shoe in its different forms, as you look out through history, has been to protect the foot so it's not damaged with an environmental change. So obviously there's countries around the world where people don't wear shoes and their feet have modified slightly within that. So their arches are slightly different and things like that. But the key thing to remember is that's how our foot was designed. I know that sounds a little odd because we're talking about humans, but obviously from a mechanics point of view, that's something that's key. Now, all of those little muscles all do different little things. So some might allow you to stand and push your foot out to the side. Some allow you to support your foot to push to the left or to the right. So from a positional point of view, they allow for a lot of correction. And also, as I said, the foot is what they call a second-class lever. Now, second-class lever is all about power. The majority of the levers in the body are third-class levers, which is all about speed. That's why we can move quickly. So what happens is we pivot on the front part. So if you think of a wheelbarrow, that's the wheel. All of the load, as I've already said, comes down to here. So that's like where the load is on a wheelbarrow. So it's the big box thing. And then the handles, the power comes at the back. So it comes around the back and it lifts the foot up. So that's where all our power comes from. And it's that big muscle, the calf muscle at the back part of your leg. So that type of lever is all about power. So that works really, really well as a shock absorber as you come down. So you put your toes down, you land, and it takes all the shock out. It allows you to change direction, but it also then allows you to be able to jump, be able to run extended distances. When I say that, you can run marathons and all sorts, but if you think of the number of steps for a marathon, that's a lot of force going through your feet. And we all know that with running, obviously, it's multiple times your body weight as you stride and step with each step. So standing, the key thing to remember is that you have your foot, it's in that position, you stand up, put the least amount of weight on it, and then gradually lower it down, but then use this foot to start walking. Now, most people habitually will not do that. You'll just stand up as you've always stood up. So it's really important to think, right, I've got to swap my feet, toe down, stand up, put my foot down, give myself a quick second, and then step forward with your injured foot. The reason for that is that you're not pushing off. As soon as you push off, you're still putting quite a lot of load through. So you want to put the least amount in that first 5 to 10 seconds. And that allows the foot a fighting chance to recover. Now, if you experience that first thing in the morning when you stand up from a chair, what you'll find is that obviously that reduces the pain significantly. And what most people say is once they get moving, the pain does drop off, so it eases. And that's because all the muscles are resetting, they're not in spasm, and they're actually helping the fascia and helping the foot. They're not contributing to part of the problem. And as I've already said, you're looking at 7 times your body weight, then you're halving it and all the other pieces straight away, force wise and load wise and pressure. All of those things are massively reduced. So for standing, that's pretty much a key thing. There is some modifications to it, but that's the primary thing as a takeaway to have a practice with. But the biggest thing is people don't do it. And I know that sounds very easy to say. It's almost like, oh, well, you didn't do your exercise or your movements. But if you think about how many times you stand up and sit down, if you consciously did that all the time, it's almost like you're relearning how to stand up. So it's getting used to doing that. And in different environments, it can be challenging. I've worked with a couple of preschool teachers recently where they work with younger children, obviously small ones, and they've got very low seats and very low everything. So they put a lot of pressure on their feet as they stand up and sit down because there's a lot of kneeling, a lot of sitting on small chairs. So it's quite difficult in that environment because you've got kids running around and you're focused on them, not on what you're doing. So I appreciate there's a lot of distraction, but those core things make a big difference. But also think about it every time you're putting your foot down. So that could be getting out of the car. And obviously, if it's your right foot and you're driving, you put your right foot down first. It's about twisting your body around, popping your feet down in the same way, weight on one side, toe on the other, getting out. That's not always possible because of parking spaces and everything else. But it's every time you actually go from a sitting to a standing position, whether that's getting off on a bus or a train in the same sort of way. So it's just spending those extra 5 to 10 seconds to run a different process so that you can stand up and reduce the pain significantly. That also stops lots of fascia damage. So it actually stops the fascia tearing again and creating this negative loop. Okay, so standing, very, very common sort of feature. One question that a lot of people ask, and it's one of the things that if people come to me in the clinic, it's a very quick takeaway, right? Have a little go at this, have a little try, have a little bit of a practice. Most people find it's quite effective and it does work, but it does take a bit of coordination and a bit of practice. Second thing, walking. Now, walking again is quite a big topic, and there's lots of things with it. I think some of the key things that I'll start the process with is that nobody really taught us how to walk. We learnt very much on how to not to fall over. So it's all about unbalancing as opposed to doing anything different. So what happened was we had our arms up in the air invariably. We were holding on to somebody. We then took a step. So we moved our foot forwards. We're looking around, we're copying. We put our foot forwards, which puts us off balance. It then puts down. We then put our other foot forwards and we're off balance. Then we put our other foot forwards and we're off balance. Once we've done a few steps and we get used to that recovering our balance, we have a few practices between a couple of sofas, and the next thing you know, that's it, lesson's over, and we're practicing and practicing and practicing and practicing. And if you think about toddlers, once they get moving, they're off all over the place, and you're stopping them going upstairs and all the other challenges. But the key thing is nobody taught you the mechanics of actually how you walk and how you should walk. I always say to people, you only learn how to walk if you injure yourself, which is the most common reason, and you have some sort of surgery on, say, hips, knees, ankles, feet, anything like that. Maybe you're on crutches for a different reason. It alters how you move and how you walk. Then the other thing that people tend to find is that they might do some modification if they're doing some sort of training. So if they're training for a particular sport or a particular movement, then suddenly they'll look at how they're moving and they look at their footwork. So boxers obviously work in one way. Tennis players do a lot of sideways movement, forwards and backwards. So again, their footwork's really, really important. Netball players, basketball players, and then obviously footballers, rugby players, all the other bits are all looking at how they can maximise their performance. And again, obvious stuff like long distance runners and other bits also then modify what they do. So those are the two main reasons people look at it. So I say to people, and people go, I need to walk heel toe. So what does that actually look like? So again, I've sent a little short video around where I've talked about keeping your feet nice and straight so that everything's square. And again, for a lot of people, you'll find that one foot sticks out. You might find that both do. Some stick in, one might stick in. So there's going to be variance. The other thing also is I talk about taking even steps and also shortening your step. And the reason for that, again, is to do with pressure and load. So the longer you stride, the more body weight transfers. As soon as you take a stride over about sort of 50 centimeters, which is relatively short, your body weight going above one lot of your body weight. So again, you're up to sort of 1.5, 1.7 times your body weight as a force, so as it's landing. And obviously that increases if you started running because you're almost jumping from stride to stride. So the key thing to think about is, again, you've got the load on your foot. So when you walk, your foot should come down, land on your heel. Okay, so that involves you picking your foot up, which a lot of people do. So the key is to load this position so you come down and land. Your body weight then transfers onto your foot, so it goes onto all the flat elements as you come forwards, and then you push off from your toes. Now, the key thing is very few people, particularly with plantar fasciitis, A, will land on their heel because they'll go, oh, it hurts. B, their weight transfer won't transfer in that position. And C, they don't push off with their toes. So they don't use their ankle and their knees. And that's important because that links a little bit into footwear as well. So in saying all that, how do you manage to walk? You swing from your hips. So what people do is, instead of walking in the sense of bending their knee and bending their ankle, they swing their foot forwards, so they land on their heel or on the flat part of the foot in that position. As they step, they transfer their body weight to here, which is fine, so the foot's in that position. But rather than pushing off and bending their knee, they swing their other leg. So what they do is, rather than walking and bending, they're actually just swinging their legs like this. Okay, so they're just swinging the leg forwards, land on the heel, swing the leg forwards, land on the heel, swing the leg forwards, hand on the heel, as opposed to bending the knee and the ankle. Now, again, that's not a problem. If you haven't got a foot problem, a knee problem, or a hip problem, you can do that for your whole life. There's not an issue with it. There's not necessarily a wrong way. It's not efficient, but as long as you can walk and you can do everything you want, it doesn't matter and you don't need to change it. The only reason you'd need to change it is if you've got an injury like plantar fasciitis. So by bringing your toes up, consciously thinking of bringing your toes up as much as you can and landing on your heel, that's the start point. And what that does is it forces the muscle at the front part of your shin to contract, so that raises your foot up. And importantly, means that all of your calf muscle needs to relax. Now, it won't relax fully straight away because it'll be under a lot of tension, but that takes pressure off this Achilles here. And that Achilles also inserts into the heel, so inserts into the base. If that's really tense, so if you've got plantar fasciitis, if you just hold the back part of your ankle here, you'll feel that that's really, really tense. As that is tense, it's putting more pressure, on the base part of your heel. So if it's putting more pressure on, it's more compression, it's pulling the fascia more, so it's putting it under more pressure. If it was released, it's under less pressure. So again, it can heal, takes the pressure off. It's not as painful. So the first step is to get your feet so you land on your heel. The next step is to come onto your body weight. So feel your body weight transfer. Most people do that fine. The last bit is to feel that you come up onto your toes, you bend your knee and you're bending your ankle. So you're pushing forwards. Now that's really, really key as a movement, but very few people do it. And the reason is because your heel hurts, you start the process wrong. So you swing your foot, as I said, most people do that. And rather than landing on your heel, which you might do with a swing, you actually start landing here, or in a lot of cases on here. So if you're landing on here, as your body weight transfers through, you don't push off, you just use the momentum of your walking. So you're not actually pushing, it's not dynamic. And people find that they walk relatively slowly. So what they do is they take shortish strides, they land on the toes, and they just speed the steps up, as opposed to take longer strides using their heels. Again, if you haven't got a problem, it doesn't matter. So I work very much on short strides initially first, landing on your heel so that you put your heel down, you transfer your body weight, then bend your knee, bend your ankle so that you can come up onto your toes, then push off. So that's a correct walking cycle. Now, the key thing with that is all of these muscles at the bottom of your foot are designed to work in that sequence. If they're working in the opposite sequence, so you're landing on here or here, what happens then is these muscles can't work properly. If they can't work properly, they can't help with walking and moving you forwards. In which case, what they do then is they're working backwards, so they're out of sync. That means they're all tensing, but tensing at the wrong time, which again is putting pressure on the heel. So there's a lot of stuff with how you move makes a big difference to how your plantar fasciitis is. Now, initially, it seems totally alien. My heel hurts. Let's put my heel down first. Bear in mind, you're only going to be standing on putting pressure on that for a short space of time, because as your heel comes down, your body weight lowers down, foot goes flat, then you come up onto your toes. So it is only a short transition, but it is counterintuitive. And also, it will be completely different to how you walk now. Now, that could be for two reasons. First reason, you've got plantar fasciitis, so you've had to modify how you walk. Second reason is you've always walked with some inaccuracies. So this is quite a disciplined way of walking, very, very structured, and exactly how you should use your body. So it's like learning a completely new skill. So I finished off this afternoon with a lady, and I was getting her to do exactly what I'm explaining now to you. So I was getting her to walk left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, just picking her toes up, no dry phase, no pushing or anything, just getting used to that first bit. She was taking a stride of about 12, 14 inches, so really, really short, so that it didn't put too much pressure onto her heels. She was doing it in socks, so I do all of my sort of work where I actually work on no shoes, no support, no insoles, nothing, because that's the best way to see how painful things are and what we need to correct. Because obviously, if we're looking at gait cycle, we need to look at how we can change stuff. And she did 4 or 5 laps. So she's doing like an 8 meter walk up and down. So she did that 3 or 4 times. But she probably did about 100 meters. At the end of it, she goes, I get that. I get it. It's getting easier. Now, the other thing that I talked about and the little video shows is to actually walk backwards. And the reason that's important is a bit like when you stand up, it's reversing all the muscles and the load. So it's taking the pressure off, but it's getting you used to feel what it's like to be on your toes with your knee bent and your ankle in the right position. So what I get people to do is once they've walked forwards, it's to reverse the process. So it's to put their toes down first, only stepping back about a foot, and then lower the foot down, then put the toes down, lower the foot down, toes down, lower the foot down. Again, highlighted it in the video. Now, those two movements, forwards and backwards, will take a lot of pressure off your fascia because it allows all of these muscles on the bottom part of the feet to start working in the right sequence. If they're working in the right sequence, they can help support the fascia and take all of the pressure off, which again is really important. So you think, okay, so I can stand up and I take the load off and the weight off and the pressure off. I can then walk differently and that will take the pressure off. And you start off obviously doing short strides, much easier to do around the house or short distances, or around the office, or around your work environment. So doing short strides, that all works. I've talked a lot about bare feet and doing stuff without wearing any shoes, and that's probably the best acid test. If you can walk around and you've got plantar fasciitis and you can get to a stage where you can start walking without shoes on or trainers or boots, straight away you know you're onto a winner. That's a good reference point for how that feels. And it's important because you need to start somewhere to know where the pain level is. Because the next thing we're going to talk about is footwear, which is quite a big topic in some ways. But footwear is one of those things which supports your feet. So it makes quite a big difference. So it supports all of what's going on with your ankle, with your foot. In that case, it means that your foot doesn't use those muscles. If it's not using those muscles, it makes your fascia more pressured because it's having to use the fascia to help support the foot, not the muscles. So it's a bit like being able to move around, but just have tendons and ligaments and no muscles. Your body wouldn't be able to move very effectively. Hence, obviously, that's why you have damage to your foot. So what does footwear do and how does that mess everything up? Well, footwear, if I work on boots and we'll work backwards. So if we look at boots, boots are really specific. Okay. The idea of a boot is that it obviously supports your foot. They're usually quite heavy. They tend to be quite big. And the applications for them are a working environment where you might have steel toe caps and you're on a building site, construction, in a factory, in a certain environment where you've got to protect your feet. And invariably, that can be a supermarket, it can be in a warehouse. Lots and lots of environments require you by law to wear some sort of protective shoes or boots primarily. And you tend to get a boot and it tends to be quite tight. So it's very tight around the ankle. It's very tight all around the foot. So it gives your ankle and foot lots of support. And that's great. And that's brilliant if you're standing. And it's brilliant if you're on really uneven ground where you could slip and fall. And obviously, then it stops you damaging your ankle. So that's the primary feature of wearing a boot. Now, the challenge with that is if you're not bending your ankle properly, it means that your foot is in quite a fixed position. So it forces how you walk. And that can be quite challenging because you don't necessarily need that level of ankle support. So the first thing I tell most people, unless you're climbing on a really undulating ground, so say you're doing some outdoor or country walking on trails or up and down like on a sort of rock faces or cliffs or whatever else, if it's relatively flat, the ankle element of a boot should be quite loose. So it should allow quite a lot of movement because you want a bit of foot protection. You don't want to go over on your ankle, but you just don't need it as tight, so it can be looser. That allows more ankle movement, which means that you'll be able to walk easier. That'll take a lot of pressure off your fascia and allow you to use some of the muscles of your foot more effectively. If we then take a step back, okay, most people, if they've got plantar fasciitis, it seems to be the weapon of choice. Skechers. I see Skechers. I should get advert for Skechers. Or everyone's got a pair of Skechers. Now, why does Skechers work so well? Well, most shoes are developed for specific purposes, and trainers in particular are developed for different sports. The majority of people wear some version of a trainer with a thicker heel and a thinner front sole. And that design is basically from the 80s, and it was designed primarily for running, so that when you strode forwards and landed on your heel, because obviously you're having a long stride, it meant it protected your heel so that you could then run and then drive and push off. So the whole purpose of a running shoe is to look at correct running mechanics, so correct running style. You land on your heel, body weight transfer, push off from your toes. So the trainer is designed specifically for that, but it's designed specifically for that with running and running in the correct action. So it was designed for athletes and then it went to general population. Now, that hasn't changed much since the 80s. When I was a kid, really little, we had pumps and it was things like Dunlop and other bits, and there were pumps and it was just a flat sole. And obviously, having running trainers was a big transition. But they all wear and everything's done in the same way. Now, what Skechers have done, which is quite clever, is that they've got exactly the similar design. Okay, they're very, very lightweight and they use memory foam and other versions of it. They're also really, really soft because they've realized that the majority of people don't run in trainers. They buy trainers for social wear, just normal wear around the house, in the garden, out and about, fashion, all the other bits. but at work even, they're designed to be really genuinely quite soft. So they feel really cushioned, and they're primarily designed from a sort of compression issue. I was going to say coefficient of restitution, but that doesn't really help you. It's all very much on how it feels from a softness point of view. So they're designed just for walking. So the load levels on them are quite low. So they're designed, say, twice your body weight, whereas a running trainer is designed to be 2, 3, 4 times your body weight, depending on how fast you run. Now, if it's quite soft, as you're standing, as you're moving, it does cushion. So that feels quite comfortable. The other thing it also does, which is interesting, is if you're in a running shoe, your foot's going to be in this position, allowing for the heel to come down with quite a thick, quite heavyweight sole and heel. If you're in this position, you've got quite a soft heel. It means instead of your foot being in this position, it's in this position. So Skechers work really well because of your body weight. It actually brings your foot in a flatter position. So it actually does help support the fascia in the best way. So if I was going to recommend any sort of footwear, no insoles. We're not going to talk about insoles at all tonight. But the key thing is to look at the trainer and look at how it compresses. How does it feel? Now, a lot of trainers, you'll stand in a shop, put them on, and they'll feel great. The key thing is to walk around and really think about putting your heels down and take some longer strides. How does it feel in that position? If they feel good, that's great. Now, I always say to people, what you want to be able to do is wear, when you've got plantar fasciitis, some sort of shoe that you can tie up so that you can get some support from it. So a lot of Skechers are slip on. That's okay, but they get quite loose quite quickly and then they start flopping around. So there's a lot less support. Now, the last thing to talk about is what I do is bare feet. So I tell everybody to have a go wearing, I always say wearing bare feet, but having bare feet. And the reason for that is it gives you a lot of reference points, but it allows you to strengthen all of those up. So if you can strengthen all your muscles up, it will support your fascia. And obviously then within that will allow you to progress forward. So you'll be able to find out where all the fine issues are. Now, you're not going to walk outside or do anything, go to work or drive or anything without shoes. And I appreciate that. But it's important to have a little go and a little try. So key things today are think about footwear and say, okay, do I need to wear boots? If that's a yes, then obviously modify what you're going to wear on a boot. If I need to wear some sort of protective footwear, can I wear a shoe? I can still have a steel toe cap. I can still have a special like anti-slip sole, but that'll allow a lot more ankle movement and that'll help your fascia significantly. If I need to wear something, then I can wear some sort of trainer. I'd always recommend a lace-up Sketcher, but with a soft sole, so with a memory foam and all the other bits in, so that you get the cushioning and the comfort effect, but it's just for walking, not for doing any exercise or training in. And then as often as possible, to wear no shoes and to get used to these 90 degrees, using the muscles in your feet and all the other elements and practicing all the movements that I've said for standing and for walking. So all of those things you can practice in different footwear. Now, if you've got tight boots on, you'll find some of the movements more challenging because you've got less ankle movement. So you'll notice straight away that your foot hurts and your ankle hurts because you're trying to push off with your toes and you can't bend and you can't move your ankle as well and you can't put your heel down as easily. And obviously those restrictions put more pressure on the fascia, but you need to have a little play around and a little practice with that. Now, the other question, those are the three main areas. So those three things by far, most people ask, how do I stand up? How do I walk? What should I wear? So it's all about very quick fixes. So I've given you some options on walking, some options on standing, and some options very much on footwear. The other thing that people asked was, why do I get it? So I've not had any problems. I do a bit of exercise, play a bit of sport, bit of cycling. I'm quite an active person. I've got an active job. I've been doing this movement and these activities for the last 10 years. Why suddenly do I get plantar fasciitis? It's, I suppose, in fairness, it's a limiting returns. So if you've been doing something for a long time, say you've been wearing boots, you work in a warehouse, and you've wore boots and you started the job 10 years ago, your muscles have got progressively weaker. Therefore, you push something or twisted or move something, which has put the fascia under pressure. As soon as the fascia starts to damage, so you start getting the little fibers and stuff within the structure starting to tear and break, you start to get some levels of pain. And obviously, you modify that, you find that you have rest at the weekend or days off, and it might repair itself. So in the early stages, it does. But most people with plantar fasciitis that I see invariably have had it for around 6 months or longer. So they've managed and coped for a period of time where it's got to a point and then they've stopped. Now, the main reason for that is obviously I've talked about this idea of it getting shorter. It also gets slightly thicker. And the reason for that is all of these muscles, which I've gone on and on and on about, get weaker and weaker. So they then can't support the fascia. So the body's really good at adapting. So it makes the fascia thicker. Okay, that's great, but in making it thicker, it also makes it slightly shorter, so it's less mobile. So it's a bit like if you've got a back problem and you have any sort of surgery, invariably they fuse the discs together, so they stop you moving those bits. Now that's great, that's a great fix, but it puts more pressure on the joint above and the joint below because obviously you've got lots of joints in your back. It's the same as a knee replacement. So if you speak to anyone who's had a knee replacement and say, go on then, kneel down, they can bend their knee to 90 degrees comfortably, maybe 100, but 130 degrees to be able to bend and kneel down is a struggle. Also, on the fact that they're absolutely paranoid that they're going to damage a knee. The fact that it's made out of boron or titanium is irrelevant. I'm going to damage it and I'm going to break it, so I can't kneel on it. But the bigger problem is that physically their leg won't bend enough. So their mobility is limiting what they can do. Exactly the same with this from a feet point of view. So if your fascia gets slightly thicker, brilliant, that sounds like it's stronger, it has to go slightly shorter. That means it's more prone to damage because it's got less flexibility and less movement. Bear in mind that all of these muscles allow you to do lots of agile things. So that's jumping, jumping up, jumping down, stopping, turning, twisting, standing on your toes. They produce a lot of force so you can change direction very quickly. So if you watch sport and you look how quickly people can change direction, that's all because of their feet. And that's all because of the small muscles. And it might be only two or three of the smaller muscles. Now, I've got a clinic, as I mentioned, in Stratford. I see people on a face-to-face basis. I've had a couple of questions from Tim and Paul. Now, Tim and Paul have gone through what I would call my at-home program. So it's a program that you can access online, and they've gone through a sequence, 369 approach, where they start off with standing, walking, and then doing everything else. So there's over 3 stages, and they've gone through this process. And the questions they asked, which was quite interesting, is that I've done this structured program. So I've done these things where I started off, I practiced everything you said with standing, I've done all the stuff with walking, I've done all the strengthening exercises that you've done to take me to allow me to do other things. I've also then looked at some of the bonus stuff where we've talked about habits and goal setting and what you need to do and how you need to structure it all. So it's exactly the same program as I do in the clinic. And their question was, I've done quite well with this home-based program. I've done it at my own pace. It's taken a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm actually moving, standing, walking that pretty well. What's the benefit of coming to see you? Which I thought was quite an interesting question. The key thing and the key difference between the at-home program, where you go through all the movements and you do it in the same structured way as what I would show you and how that would work within the clinic, is that in each of the sessions at the clinic, I use medical devices to help reduce the pain and inflammation, which obviously allows you to do the movements quicker and to progress quicker. But it also actually helps heal the tissue, so it helps repair the tissue, and it stimulates the cells in that area to start repairing the fascia. If you're repairing the fascia, bringing the pain and inflammation down, and doing a really quite cleverly structured rehabilitation process, all of those things will speed everything up a lot quicker. So I spend a lot of time with people in the clinic to go through that process like they would if they were doing the program online, but all the bits that they have for the treatment, the clever bits as such, all of the medical devices that I use to reduce the pain, reduce the inflammation, and help the actual accelerated healing process, mean that you recover a lot quicker. Hence the high level of success, the 93% or whatever I've got currently. So those sort of things make the biggest difference, and that speeds everything up. Now, all the movements make a massive difference. It just takes a bit longer, and it takes a bit longer, and you need to then impact that on what other else you're doing in your life. Now, I get challenged quite a lot on different issues. So, for instance, Paul is a tennis player. So he's got his pain with doing a home-based course down to around a 2, 1 and 2. And he does all of his normal activities. He can walk, he can do extended walking, he can do a little bit of jogging. So he can do all of these sorts of movements, but he's struggling with tennis. So obviously tennis is sideways movement, forwards and backwards, jumping, stopping, twisting. Your feet are under a lot of pressure. And obviously it can be on quite a hard surface. So he plays indoors, uses different trainers, but he's on his toes a lot, so he puts a lot of pressure on his feet. So the one thing he can't do is play tennis as well as he can do all the other stuff with a home-based program. So the difference coming to see me face to face is that we can go through a program to get you to do normal stuff, those sort of 3 phases. But see me face to face, we can modify stuff to allow you to do things like tennis, badminton, netball, whatever your sport is, your activity. I see quite a lot of runners. We can modify that on a one-to-one basis because everyone has certain things that they can do, certain things that they can't. It's a similar thing with golfers and lower back problems or shoulder problems with serving, with things like tennis or other movements, or people that work in factories and have repetitive stress issues. So within that, the clinic again allows you to have those sorts of benefits and those sorts of options. Now, I focused on sort of 3 main questions. I had a lot of responses. I had some odd responses. Can you do this? Can you do that? How quickly can you improve stuff? That's quite difficult because it's how long's a piece of string. I'm only looking at averages. So for just doing movements, sort of home-based program, we're looking very much at having 6 weeks. 6 weeks, as long as you do stuff diligently. If you don't do things diligently, then obviously your benefits will be reduced and they won't be quite so intense. So you need to focus on doing everything in a structured program way. The other advantage is that if you have a 6-week at-home program, the first week you're usually really quite engaged and you want to do it and you're on it and you're doing bits. As soon as you have a level of success, what happens then is things reduce down, you don't do things as frequently, and you don't keep repetition. By seeing somebody in a clinic environment, obviously you get all the benefits of all the medical devices I've spoke about, but you also again get the benefits of the accountability. So it's about what can you do now? So I would do go out for a quick 5-minute walk with people and see what they're doing mechanics wise to make sure that they're walking in the right way. I do stuff with people with standing, with sitting, right, stand up, do it quicker, do it without holding on, do it with your arms in front of you, those types of things, so that you're under the most amount of pressure. And having accountability makes quite a big difference. I've had it from my own experience as well. And I suppose the final thing is that everybody can get plantar fasciitis if they push themselves quite hard. So I went out the other day. I'm in the current elements of training to do a 25 miler in a couple of months with the Shakespeare Hospice. And it's 25 miles in one day. It's not a normal thing. It's not something I've done. I'm using it as part of my training plan to be able to go to Everest next year. And I did 10.5 miles relatively quickly, but 10.5 miles, had boots on, and I was walking, getting used to quite a regular pace and everything else. And my feet today were absolutely killing. And it's all the muscles. So it's all these things that I've been talking about, particularly funny enough on the outer edge. So it wasn't the heel, my fascia felt okay, but the muscles, well, God, I feel tired. But it's getting used to being on my feet for longer periods of time because I'm no different to you. I'm susceptible to injury if I suddenly start doing things. I don't walk anywhere. So I do very small amounts of steps because I spend a lot of time on a Monday to Friday basis in a clinic. So I don't do lots of steps. I do not as much exercise as I'd like. And then within that, you suddenly think, oh, I'm going to start training for something. So 10.5 miles from 2, 3 miles is quite a big increase. And I need to build myself up over the next 6 to 8 weeks to get up to 25 miles. So that's going to be quite a challenge. And obviously my feet are my weakest link. So yes, I found it in my legs and my knees a little bit, my hips and my back, but my feet felt like they're on fire. So within plantar fasciitis, there's lots of other bits that obviously then from a muscle point of view and a shoe point of view, all of those things have quite a large impact on the success of what happens. So how do I work? How can you contact me? As I said, I've got an at-home process, so I've got an online program and everything else. I'll put some various links and stuff and I'll email those out. Most people book in, and when I say book in, they book in as a phone call to have half an hour free conversation and talk about their plantar fasciitis issues, their challenges, and then how I can help and how that's going to work. And that gives them a good idea about obviously having a conversation with me. It irons out some of the kinks, so they ask for some sort of elements. Sometimes people will engage and do sort of like an online at home program. And a lot of time people will come and see me for a consultation. Now, the consultation element is very much looking at, okay, it's me seeing how bad you are. And sometimes people are nowhere near as bad as they think. Sometimes they're quite poorly and they're really struggling. And it's about then looking at building a treatment program to suit them best and to get them back to normality, for want of a better description, as quickly as possible. So, as I said, I've talked a lot. We spent about the last 50 minutes talking about 3 key areas. So if you've missed it live, it's important to say, okay, let's have a little look. I've recorded this so that people can look at it in the Facebook group and they'll have access to it via email so that they can have a look and say, right, okay, I'll have a look at that bit, have a look at that bit. And different people will have different issues. If you've got any other questions or any other issues, if you can either email me, is probably the best way. I've had quite a lot of email dialogue with people this week because it allows me to respond then in my own time. If you're going to call or book a call, is probably the best, and you can do that on the website. And then, as I say, have a little look in the comments, the Facebook group. There'll be more information coming over the next few days. So thanks very much for logging on, and I will see you all and speak to you all soon. My name's Stephen Grinnell from Interex Pain Clinic.